Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Melbourne CocoaHeads number 158. My name is Ben, and to those of you who already know me, hello again. And for those who don't know me, I'm viewed to appear on the Slack and on most socials. Just some quick introductions. In the spirit of reconciliation, Melbourne CocoaHeads acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to the land, sea and community. We pay our respect to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. Tonight we have two presentations, one coming from New South Wales in a tiny, tiny unknown town of Newcastle from Tony Arnold, and he gave me the permission to call his presentation All Will Be Revealed. I'm sure you can all figure out what that one's about. And second, we have Chendo, Jack Chen, demonstrating his app named Shortcat. Quick interjection, there are some free snacks at the front. For those of you who walked in a bit late, you might not have seen them, but I have brought some Kit Kats from Tokyo with me for you all to just pick from. You can you might get wasabi, matcha, red bean sandwich, pudding, or peach flavored. Take whichever one you want. They're all to go. I'm not taking them back with me. So eat up. This is our code of conduct. This meetup is governed by the Melbourne CocoaHeads Code of Conduct. If you are being harassed, notice that someone else in an uncomfortable situation, or you have any other concerns, please get in touch either in person to an organizer, by email, or using the anonymous form online. You can find more details of this on the website, and a summary of the Code of Conduct is up here on the page. I'm not going to read all of that out, I don't think. Just some housekeeping. The toilets are past the elevators and turn right. The emergency exit is also near the toilets, and don't forget to COVID check in if it's still required. Name tags. I have one, very meticulously written and peeling off my coat. Red denotes an organizer. Feel free to ask any questions. I forgot my red one, but I haven't done this for a while, so please ask someone actually with a red dot. And the people with blue tags are new, so please make them feel welcome. Be very nice to them. Today only. I'm joking. As for questions, no questions during the presentation or heckling. That goes out. If watching remote, please ask in the hashtag meetup channel on Slack. I will ask the questions on your behalf, assuming that someone is going to have a stream of Slack open for me to check that. This will help the evening flow better and allows both audiences, both in person and remote, to participate. Next up, we have our sponsors. We'd like to thank our gold sponsor, Itty Bitty Apps. Been around in the Melbourne scene for a very, very long time and are responsible for Reveal. Our silver sponsors, I want to say Dias, I think that's correct, Dias, and Deloitte Digital. We thank them all for their generosity and their support. We have a drinks night because what tech meetup is complete without copious amounts of alcohol, coming up on the 20th of August, which the 30th of August. Yeah, that's not my mistake. You heard that. You heard that. It's on the Tuesday, the 30th of August, 2022. Always the last Tuesday of the month, anyway. Do we know where that's going to be? At Penny Blue. I don't know where that is, but I'm assuming that's in the Melbourne CBD. So if you want to know more, jump into the, I think it's hashtag Drinks Night channel on the Slack and Melbourne CocoaHeads. We have some other affiliated groups. We have Sydney CocoaHeads. A little bit of creativity there with the naming, GDG Melbourne, and meetup.com/theweb, a web meetup. Is there any more meetups? Yes, we have obviously more on there, and there's apparently Canberra CocoaHeads as well. Did anyone want to talk about that for a second? Do we have a Canberran? Quick summary from Hugh there. We have a Canberra CocoaHeads and you can Google it. Cool. Fascinating. How to find us, you can find us online at melbournecocoaheads.com, melbournecocoaheads.com/Slack, and then that channel for hashtag meetup, and at Melbourne Coco on Twitter. On our Slack, we have the meetup channel, some of the most popular channels that you should check out. Sort of not really much activity these days that I check, but a lot of it tends to happen in random in general. Usually some tidbits about what Apple have done or things they noticed in iOS, like the battery indicator debacle that was everywhere online this week. And if anyone's looking for a job or people looking for people to hire, it's always in hashtag jobs. This week I've been asked to read this out from Michael. He shipped Focused Work 3, and it is based on the summary that he provided me. It's a really good like Pomodoro app, and you can allow yourself to do focused work, hence the name, pretty easily, and I'm looking forward to actually trying this. Looks pretty interesting. And this is the wrong speaker notes. Okay, that's fine. And if you shipped anything at all, apps, or I will say like a gist, a Medium post, well, people don't really blog on Medium these days, but like a blog post or a CocoaPod, a Swift package, anything, tell us in Slack and you can pop up a quick slide like that and get someone to read it out for you, or you can jump up at your seat and read that out too. The first speaker we have for next. We've got to switch this around. I'm very sorry about that. The first speaker we have tonight is Tony Arnold from Novo Castria, Newcastle in New South Wales, and he will be joining us remotely to talk about everything Reveal. And I think I can just step off.
All right. Can everybody hear me? Excellent. All right. Good evening. My name's Tony. I work on Reveal at Itty Bitty Apps, which got a lot of headline there at the start. Thank you very much. Tonight, I'd like to give you a demo of a set of really useful accessibility, debugging, and verification features that we've recently added to Reveal. I'm sure that some of you have already seen them, and hopefully more than a few of you have tried them out on your own apps. But for those of you who haven't heard of our plucky little macOS app, I'll first run through a quick high-level overview of what Reveal is. After that, I'm going to risk chaos and disaster by giving you a live demo of the new accessibility features, so pray to the demo gods if you believe in them. Sound good? Great, let's go. All right, Reveal's a product and really a passion project developed by Itty Bitty Apps for very close to 10 years now. It's a productivity tool for mobile developers in the Apple ecosystem, and it's used by thousands of developers from indies right through to developers working at bigger companies like Google and Uber. We built Reveal partly because we could see a need for it in the work we were doing with our clients, and our developers, designers, and QA people use it in their work. It often solves real-world problems for us and for clients really quickly. So what does it do? Primary use case for Reveal is when something's not quite right with your user interface. It might be that something's not showing up in the right place or the right size or even at all. It could be that the colors or the shape of your view hierarchy aren't quite right. Importing your app's view hierarchy into Reveal will help you to quickly identify underlying issues that can cause these problems and more. Reveal also lets you modify the properties of your layout elements at runtime. It allows you to quickly experiment without having to rebuild your app. This is fantastic for testing out finicky font and color combinations in place. In many ways, Reveal is quite similar to the element inspectors in modern web browsers, except that our DOM equivalent, the view hierarchy, is considered somewhat private. And as native developers, our build run cycle is significantly slower than that web developers have. But I'm not here to talk about the layout debugging features tonight. Until this year, Reveal's been tightly focused on improving the run code debug cycle for app layouts. As you probably know, apps developed using Apple's mobile UI framework, UIKit, have a direct link between the code that you write in Xcode and the view hierarchy that your app builds in memory when it's run. With the recent introduction of and the ongoing adoption of declarative UI frameworks like Swift UI, we're looking at a future where the code that you write has little or no technical correlation with the view hierarchy that your app ends up building at runtime. And that's great, don't get me wrong. I'm excited to force feed Swift UI into all of my projects, whether it's appropriate or not. I've experienced the soaring highs and the fury-inspiring lows of Swift UI, but when it's finished, I think it's going to be really, really great. What it does mean, though, is that some point in the future, not just yet, Reveal's layout debugging tools may end up being less useful when most of our apps are built using frameworks like SwiftUI. And we'd really like to continue being useful. So we looked carefully at other pain points in the development workflow that we might be able to improve, and found one that wasn't just painful, but it was also incredibly meaningful, and that's accessibility. So Reveal's new accessibility workspace gives our users the tools to inspect, experience, and verify that their apps are accessible to all of their users. I'm sure many of you are aware of the statistics around accessibility, but let's run through a couple of them anyway. So roughly 15% of the world's population experiences some form of disability. Here in Australia, we have a not-for-profit organisation that provides services to people who are blind or have low vision that's called Vision Australia. Now, according to Vision Australia, in Australia alone, there are currently 357,000 people who are blind or have low vision. This number's only going to get bigger. They're projecting that it's going to grow to 500,000 people by the year 2030. In addition to that, roughly 8.5% of all Australians have some form of colour vision deficiency, or colour blindness as it's more commonly known. In research published by Apple in May last year, 94% of the apps that they looked at had at least one screen that was not properly accessible. And for anybody who works in the industry, we know it doesn't take much to render a screen unusable for a subset of your users, and regressions to accessible UIs are frequent. So, we've spent the better part of the past year investigating, prototyping, building, and talking to experts in the field about improving the tooling around how we all build accessible interfaces for our apps. Our goal is to help developers create great accessible experiences by putting the accessible interfaces of their apps front and center, by making it easier to see what's going on. Our hope is that this will create a virtuous cycle, as it has for things like unit testing, where improved awareness and tooling will lead to better processes, and hopefully to better apps for everyone. So, let's set some context. What you're seeing on screen right now is Apple's Accessibility Inspector, an app that ships along Xcode. It's really the only developer tool that we currently have available to manually test accessibility in apps built for their platforms. It's an app that can really only be described as unloved. It does what it needs to, but it's slow in use and it requires you to manually focus on each accessibility element to see its details. To meaningfully test accessibility with this tool takes time. It's slow in part because the process of manual testing requires a familiarity with the accessible user interfaces of your devices, and it's arguably hard for exactly the same reason. So, let me show you how we at Itty Bitty Apps think this should work. Cross your fingers, guys. Let's hope this is going to work. All right, let's bump over. Okie dokie. Can we see a simulator on screen at that end? Excellent. All right. What I'd like to do during this demo is explore how much faster Reveal can be for debugging the accessible interfaces of your app. To do this, I'm going to use a simple demo app that James, one of our... No? We're missing stuff? All good? Okay. So James put this together for us specifically for this purpose, and it's appropriately called Itty Bitty App. Right. So let's connect to it. It's got 3 screens in it, and we'll run through each of them. The first example is a fairly standard view of the weather for today, plus an overview of the weather for the coming week. The UI looks pretty great, doesn't it? It's reasonably well laid out. The colours are mostly bright and they present in a high enough level of contrast. The fonts are also pretty large and readable. First up, this screen's built entirely SwiftUI. So the work that we've been doing with the accessibility workspace fully supports apps and views built using SwiftUI, whether it's from the app level or just individual views within your screens. We also continue to support UIKit apps running on iOS, iPadOS, and tvOS. So, the new accessibility workspace that we've built gives us 3 modes that we can use to inspect our app's accessible user interfaces. And they correlate pretty closely to Apple's own accessible user interface tooling. First one is VoiceOver, second one's voice control, and then there's also a set of industry standard color contrast checking tools. So let's dive in and have a look at the first of the accessibility workspace's 3 modes, which is VoiceOver mode. For those of you who don't know, VoiceOver is a feature of all modern Apple devices that reads aloud the accessible user interface of what's currently on screen. It's a critical feature for blind and low vision users. Traditionally, building, verifying, and then testing the VoiceOver UI of an app involves walking through each screen an element at a time in Apple's Accessibility Inspector. Alternately, you can load your app on a physical device, turn on VoiceOver, and test the interface directly. In Reveal's VoiceOver mode, we present all of your app's VoiceOver UI in one go. You don't need to click through each element to find out how something will be read aloud or wade through VoiceOver on a physical device. It's all here on screen at once. The navigator on the left shows the accessible elements on this screen, numbered in the order that VoiceOver will read them. This allows you to see and resolve potentially confusing user interface due to the order in which elements are read. The label of each row in the navigator shows what will be read, and it's accurate to what's on device. Anyone who's tested Apple's Accessibility Inspector can tell you that there are subtle differences between what a physical device will read out to your users versus what ends up being presented by the simulator while you're developing and testing. Selecting any row in this navigator shows more detail for that element and allows you to identify potential issues with the accessibility properties of your elements, such as labels, traits, hints, and values. So let's have a quick look at one of these types of issues now. If we filter this view hierarchy, this accessibility hierarchy, and look for elements that have the image trait, we can see a pretty big oversight in this view. The weather descriptions in this view rely solely on the out-of-the-box localized descriptions that SF symbols provide by default. SwiftUI has been really clever here by providing this localized description, and for some elements, such as the breezy symbol, this works great. But the icon for when it's sunny reads to VoiceOver as brightness higher, comma, image. We should fix that before we ship this to users. The navigator can also highlight opportunities to group elements into more meaningful singular elements. Turn that off now. For instance, if we look at the entries for each day under the next week, we can see that it's just a jumble of short words and numbers. The first row is going to be read out as Friday, 28 degrees, 12 degrees, brightness higher, image. It's not great. There's not enough context in that for it to be useful, and to be honest, it borders on gibberish. But Reveal made it super simple to see that it's a problem by putting everything together on screen like this. Okay, moving on. Voice control is also a feature of most modern Apple devices, and it lets you navigate the accessible user interfaces of your app using spoken commands. It's often used in combination with VoiceOver, but they can be used independently of each other by users who have difficulty physically controlling their device. Reveal offers a mode that exposes this accessible user interface in a similar fashion to the VoiceOver mode that I just showed you. So let's switch to that now. Voice control mode is very quickly showing us that for this screen, there aren't any interactive elements beyond the tab bar items at the very bottom. And for this view, that's exactly what I expected. We'll come back to voice control mode in a minute with a more full-featured example. In addition to our VoiceOver and voice control modes, we offer a final mode that allows you to check the contrast of your app's visible user interface. At present, there are no real shared or formal guidelines around colour and colour contrast for native applications. What we do have, though, is the W3C's Colour Accessibility Guidelines, or as it's affectionately known, WCAG. Reveal supports WCAG version 2.1's AA and AAA checks, which are great for quickly identifying potential areas of your user interface where there's just not enough contrast between elements. In the next release of Reveal, we've also added beta support for the new Advanced Perceptual Contrast Algorithm, or APCA, both bronze and silver levels. When it's finished, this algorithm will form the basis of the next generation of the W3C's Colour Accessibility Guidelines. That's version 3 of WCAG. APCA takes into consideration a whole host of properties and situational conditions that WCAG 2.1 does not, including text size and weight, as well as human perception. Interestingly, humans don't perceive contrast linearly across hue and lightness, so APCA has been designed to take this into account. It's a big improvement, and I'm happy to say we'll be supporting it shortly. And we're committing to staying abreast of changes to APCA as it continues to develop. So let's have a quick look at the contrast of this screen before we move on to another example. In contrast mode, we can see that there is a slight issue with the nighttime temperature labels as they get closer to the bottom of the screen. This has been caused by the gradient background. The contrast on the inactive tab bar items is also far too low. They are still interactive, so they should be visible. We'd want to fix this before shipping. In addition to the modes that I've just demonstrated, Reveal also supports filtering your visible UI to let you experience how a user with colour vision deficiency or colour blindness would see your app. These filters are great, and at this stage they're pretty unique. iOS offers on-device filters to correct the effect of these conditions, but Reveal's filters let users who don't have a CVD actually experience a simulation of it for themselves. So if you're one of the 1 in 100,000 to have blue cone monochromacy, the colour of the active tab won't be very visible if we shift to the colours that are currently in this example. Let's just turn that on and have a look. So you can see down here, it's almost completely invisible on this screen. All right, let's move on to another example. This next one looks a bit like a popular code hosting platform, so I apologise for that. We'll bump over, go to the next screen. Okay. This is a really text-heavy interface, again created using SwiftUI. If we filter this screen for elements with the header accessibilities trait, we can see that this screen has 2 headers, which is great. Information-dense apps can be really slow to navigate using VoiceOver and voice control, and including proper headers can dramatically improve the navigation for users who do use these interfaces. Let's clear that guy off. Here's another useful visual filter that we've included. It's called Screen Curtain. Now, what Screen Curtain lets you do is hide the visual user interface of your app, allowing you to very cleanly and clearly focus on the accessibility interfaces. Looking at both the navigator and the canvas with the Screen Curtain effect active, we can see there are a number of problems here. Again, grouping of elements is what we're looking at. Beyond the lifetime stats, let me just find this guy down here. Beyond the lifetime stats area, where each element has been automatically grouped by SwiftUI's list, this is something you get for free, most of the other major clusters here probably should be grouped but aren't. Now, we did see this in our earlier example, but it's almost impossible to follow what's going on in terms of the order of elements in this interface. What is the context of these numbers? We're looking at numbers and dates and they just don't go together. It's not good at all. All right, let's move back to voice control mode. So in a more fully featured example, set to voice control mode, we can see that the navigator displays the interactive elements with their numbers and labels. Voice control allows you to speak either of these to activate an element's action. We can see that most of the labels on this screen are synthesized from the accessibility label of the element, so they're not particularly useful for describing an action that the element will perform. This is another issue that we'd want to address in this screen by setting or customizing the appropriate accessibility properties. All right, moving to another of our colour vision deficiency filters, we can experience how a user with deuteranopia, a form of red-green colour vision deficiency, would see our app. It's visually pretty clear straight away that there's a significant issue with the colours. You can see here with what we've used to represent the add and removed lines, that that's just not going to fly. It doesn't hold any semantic meaning for people who have this form of colour vision deficiency. So the algorithms that we've used to implement these filters are considered best in class. We consulted with Vision Australia during their development to make sure our implementation was really representative of these conditions. Now, it's important to note that all of our implementations in these filters pitch to the extreme end of these conditions. So this is as bad as it gets, but they're representative of those worst case scenarios so that you can see very quickly where there's an issue. All right. An interesting thing is if we switch to the color contrast checking mode, it will work with the active filter at the same time. So it's basically going to show us there's not sufficient contrast for people on these labels either. Okie doke. Turn these filters off, switch back to VoiceOver. Now, my final example is a pretty little onboarding screen that we pulled together. And it was completely created in UIKit. So in VoiceOver mode, we can quickly see that our quite visible button elements down the side here are missing, and that the frame of our Go to My Account button down the bottom here isn't quite what we'd expect. It's a little bit sus. So the 3 vertically stacked buttons are custom views that inherit from UI view, not from UI control. So they're not automatically exposed to the accessibility hierarchy like UI control subclasses are. Now, I can't be the only one who's been frustrated enough with the API of UI button that just ended up rolling my own subclass. Reveal makes this kind of oversight really easy to catch. So our Go to My Account button at the bottom is also custom. But it has a label subview that is a UI label, which does get automatically exported to the accessibility hierarchy and will be read as a static text element. It's pretty clear that this isn't what we intended here. The accessibility frame doesn't even remotely match our buttons visual frame. So let's have a look at how this looks in voice control mode. Right, voice control doesn't offer much here. The elements we're expecting to be interactive are custom and therefore inaccessible. See how fast we're able to check all this? Our team at Itty Bitty Apps have been using this version of Reveal for a little while now, and it's saving us time every time we need to work on the accessible interfaces of the apps we're involved with. Now, if we switch back to one of the color contrast checking modes, there's a little bit of a surprise on this screen. So let's just bump over. So that fancy background graphic, he's lowering the text text contrast where it intersects with the labels. It's not by much, and it only just fails WK 2.1's AA accessibility checks. But because this is a UI kit hierarchy, we can actually leverage one of Reveal's other superpowers, which is modifying the view hierarchy at runtime, and test a fix for this in place. So let's switch back to the layout workspace. We'll need to refresh. And what we can do is grab onto that image and have a look. I'm not 100% sure what's going to work here, but I think if we reduce the opacity of this view a little, say to 10% rather than 30%, it might end up fixing the issue for us. So let's do that. All right, you can see there it's reflected that change. Let's switch back to the accessibility workspace and see whether that fixed the issue. Here we go, bravo. That fixed it. So we can then pass that on to our design team, or we can have a chat to them about it and let them know that it fixed it. I mean, to be honest, I think our design team could very easily use Reveal to uncover these issues themselves if they were keen to do that. Okie dokie. So that's the end of my demo. I'm going to switch quickly back to my slides. Give it a sec to catch up. Okie dokie. That was pretty cool, eh? I hope you can see just how much faster Reveal is for checking your accessible user interfaces than the existing tooling we've had to date. Alongside all of the features I've just shown you, we've made sure that when you save a snapshot from Reveal, it's going to save out the accessibility data right there alongside the layout data, like it's always done. This lets you share a full fidelity capture of a problem as you're seeing it on a specific device, OS, and application version. Really, really useful. We've also included the ability to copy or save nicely formatted images of what you can see in the new accessibility workspace, and you can see a few samples of these on screen right now. These images are great for sharing with your team when you need to quickly and clearly demonstrate an issue. We attach them to GitHub issues, discussions in Notion, and often copy and paste them directly into our Slack channels. So that was everything I had to show you tonight. I'm really happy to have been able to demo this to you all, and I want to thank you for your time. I hope that you enjoyed what I've shown you, and I'd really love for you to go and try Reveal's new accessibility workspace on your own apps, and please let me know if you do. So that's it. Did anybody have any questions?
Well, all right, lots of questions. Hang on a sec. Take it in turns, guys.
Yeah, just curious to know if it also works with a web view.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't work with web views, sadly. So web views in a lot of, or most of our applications are hosted out of process, and we can't get to those. We come in through your actual application, so no.
Thanks, Tony.
Yeah. Hey Tony, it's Chendo. I love that view. That would be amazing. My only question is, would we be able to use that on Mac apps? Because you are right, the accessibility inspector that Apple ships is horrendously bad, and it needs to be burnt at the stake. So, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, Chendo. It doesn't work with AppKit apps at this stage, or Mac apps. We've had limited success getting it to work with Mac Catalyst, but I think in the current release of Reveal, it's not a going concern at this point. So we'd like to get there, but not at this stage.
Cool.
Were there any other questions?
G'day, Tony, it's Pete.
Hey, Pete.
Less of a question, more of a comment about how powerful this is. So previously at ASOS, we had to do these demos where we would be using the screen reader on device and go, look how terrible this is. You need to care about this. Whereas like when I use this at REA, take one screenshot of Reveal and lots of using previews annotations for arrows and go, terrible, 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 terrible. it's like so much easier to convey that conversation internally that like the screen accessibility, like the voiceover is just much easier to capture in this as opposed to trying to record a demo of the actual screen reader. So yeah, no questions as a comment. Keep up the good work.
Really great. Thank you.
Hi Tony, just a question on behalf of an in-person attendee, Amy, in the hashtag meetup channel. She's loving that the Reveal's accessibility tools just work with SwiftUI. It's a really nice feature, and she would like to know, will there be a version of Reveal released that can do accessibility review and testing for macOS apps? But I feel like we already answered that, so I didn't read the question before I asked you. Sorry, thanks mate.
That's okay. Yeah, no, not at this stage.
Hey, I have a question then. As has been pointed out several times, it's great if we can... it's a great way to go back to your developers and your designers and say, hey, this stuff's non-compliant. Is there a way we can run this in CI to have it automatically spit that sort of report out and fail the build if it doesn't have properly accessible views? With
the current release, no. But I think I'm allowed to say that that's something that we will be looking at shortly. So, yes.
That's great news. One volunteer for beta testing. Were there any other questions for Tony? Anything else? No? Cool. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everybody. Have a lovely night.
Hello. Cool. Hey everyone. Welcome to my talk. It's called Building Shortcut Faster. For those who don't, oops, that's not the right button. For those who don't know me, I'm Chendo, aka Jack Chen, but Chendo is what people know me by. I like to build things, specifically workflow efficiency tooling. My day job, I'm a co-founder at Assembly4, and my socials are Chendo on Twitter and Slack, and anywhere that's relevant. So today, I'm talking to you about my app called Shortcut, which is a Mac keyboard productivity app, where the goal is you can do things faster using less brain power. And what that effectively means is it enables you to click on UI elements with your keyboard. And the way it does that, thank you Tony for explaining the accessibility API, because this is very relevant to my talk, is it uses the accessibility API to enumerate the user interface and make it available so you can search it with a fuzzy search algorithm. So in VS Code, Sublime, Xcode now has it, which I also kind of helped get there. You can also activate menu items, switch windows, insert emojis for the time being. And it works, it works almost everywhere on your Mac where accessibility works. I actually first presented this at Melbourne CocoaHeads back in 2012, which is a very long time ago. We were back in RMIT. And I remember, eating pizza in the hallway a lot. Oh, we do? I'd like to see it. I'll give a quick demo because it's probably easier to show than actually. Oh, this is gonna be interesting. I didn't think about this. Let's system preferences. Ooh. Okay, so let's say when you activate Shortcut, it scans the interface and then makes everything visible and searchable. For example, if I want to go back, B will search, you'll see back, and because the element itself is tagged and labeled correctly in this particular case, so you can hit enter and it clicks on it for you. So this works pretty much everywhere, including in Electron apps, in Safari, in web views, so on and so forth. So for example, just a quick demo, if I want to go into change my network DNS settings, I type network, I can go, I guess I don't really have, let's try advanced, so ADV, search as advanced, I can hit enter, DNS, add, so the add button is actually labeled correctly as well, add DNS server. Sometimes Apple doesn't label their stuff correctly, which is extremely annoying. But yeah, so I can effectively operate most of my Mac with just my keyboard. It also searches menus, so I'm not sure how that's going to search the menu there, but let's just see. Menu item. Oh yeah, so you can see it's probably a bit small actually, but you can see that it can also enumerate the menu and show you the keyboard shortcuts as well as all the relevant stuff there. So I think in displays, so it exposes every single preference pane as a menu as well, so I can hit enter and it effectively activates that. It can also do emoji stuff, which is probably less exciting to people, but let's say you activate shortcut, you hit colon to enter emoji search mode, and then you can insert emojis with a synonym supported emoji database. So for example, on Slack, I think the official hanky is for the poop emoji, but I've made it so that it also works with turd, crap, poo, and number 2. Oh, there it is. Yeah, because it was like Apple's own emoji picker was frustrating me a lot, so I kind of hacked that in a weekend, and now I have to maintain it, which is the downside of it. But yeah, that's the demo of Shortcut. Oh, where's my screen? Why to do this? I've always been passionate about improving workflow efficiency, mostly because I use computers for both work and play. And so since I was a teenager, I had been worried about RSI. So during uni, I made the painful switch to a different keyboard layout called Dvorak. That is you don't see it. That's a picture of it there. As you can see, only the A and M keys are in the same location. Everything else is different. And it was quite painful to learn, so I don't suggest learning this. Learn Colmac or something else. But Dvorak is good because it was designed with the English letter frequencies in mind, right? So as you can see, all the vowels are on your left hand, and then all the commonly used letters are effectively on your home row. QWERTY is designed to prevent typewriters from jamming. So ask yourself why you're using an ancient keyboard layout that is designed to make you slower, ultimately. And on the same note, I kind of got mad at needing to move my hands off the keyboard to click, and that's why I'm here today, I suppose. So back in 2012, I had to pick a way to build this. So my technical background back then, and I guess also now, is primarily web-based. So that's kind of Ruby, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, as well as infrastructure and ops. At best, I would be, back then, I would have been a Objective-C hobbyist, where my only major, I guess, Objective-C bit of code would be I added a feature to item 2 that some of you might know as semantic history, where the idea is you can command and click on a path in the on your buffer to open in your text editor. Where the goal is to effectively make the backtrace, you can go from the backtrace to the relevant line in your editor quite quickly. I'll give a quick demo because if you don't know it, it's very good. Obviously, I'm biased because I wrote it, but let me make that bigger. Is it my night shift? Do I have night shift on? Hold on. Where's my cursor? Okay. How do I turn night shift off? Right. Shift options. Night shift. Turn off. Hey, I turned it off, I think. Better? Kind of? Okay, cool. Let's do some weird flickering thing. So if you hold on Command and hover over a path, you'll see that iTerm highlights it, right? So the idea is you click here, and it opens up in my editor on my other screen. Okay, cool. Where's my cursor? Yeah, okay, so believe me when I say when you command click on it, it opens up the editor to the correct line. So you don't have to like, mess around, open your editor, get there, and it understands characters as well. Let me see if I can just. Oh my god. Okay. Oh. No. All right, so let's go back to here. Let's open something completely random. So here, line 34, character 51. There you go, line 34, character 51. So this works with, most common editors. If you use iTerm, very useful. I suggest you use it. If you like saving a bit of time. Back to talk. Yeah. So okay. With that in mind, to pick the first architecture for Shortcut, I realized after building that iTerm feature, I didn't like Objective-C. It's kind of verbose and too many square brackets for me. I like Ruby, so it's easy to read and write, at least for me. That screenshot there is a bit of the prototype code for Shortcut that I first hacked together. And I found there was a project called MacRuby, which is a official Apple project, which was based on Ruby Cocoa, where the idea is you can use Ruby to write Mac apps. Yeah. The good part about this was I was able to have a working prototype in an evening, except the evening was actually probably until 3 a.m. in the morning. But it was enough to be able to show people at work the next day, which is the same day, I suppose, which was great. I was productive immediately, which is fantastic when you want to test an idea, and you're still able to build to a native app that runs and feels like a Mac app. However, performance was a big issue, as there was a large overhead on calling into Cocoa and Carbon APIs, which is painful when you have to make a lot of accessibility API calls. It was also still interpreted. Obviously, interpreted will always be slower than compiled and native. Getting data out of Carbon would be tricky at times, and ultimately building the interface felt really jank. But the main issue was longevity concerns, and I was right, as MacRuby died in 2011. No. Yeah, 2011? That was before, anyway. Yeah, okay. Because the main dev had left Apple and started RubyMotion as an external project, which is the same idea, but rather than using interpreted Ruby, it would use LVM to compile Ruby into native, which was much faster. But ultimately, that got sold, and it's pretty much dead today. So I'm kind of glad I didn't go down that road. So for the next bit of the architecture, which I'll call V1, I suppose, I had to go with a trusted and, I guess, usable Objective-C, as Swift did not exist back in 2012, which is quite sad. I also used Reactive Cocoa, as functional reactive programming was all the rage back then. Also used Sparkle, which is a update kind of framework, which most apps use, I believe. And back then, I used HockeyApp for error reporting, which has since been bought by Microsoft, so it's really bad now. One benefit of this particular architecture was I was able to leverage more, I guess, Cocoa APIs. So one cool feature I was able to add was matching non-English languages with English letters. So a demo of that here in Japanese. So it would be able to take effectively non-English languages and turn them into a English representation. So for example, that button, the first 3 characters say subete. So S-U-B-E will actually match it, which was very cool at the point in time. But I haven't re-implemented that feature because I don't think anyone actually used it. So the good parts about this, Objective-C has a extensive ecosystem, which is great, loads of libraries, all that stuff. Instruments for app is fantastic. I would say probably the best profiler type software that I've ever used, and it's plenty fast enough. The bad, building UIs sucked still. I don't like storyboards. Constraints were kind of annoying. I don't like the kind of weird graphical way you kind of build it, but also it was just kind of hostile to work with. And merging a storyboard in Git was a disaster generally. And I still didn't like writing Objective-C. I just had to do it. And Reactor Cocoa made debugging horrendous with intense stack traces. So that screenshot there is, I think, from GitHub Desktop, which used that. And you would just have like 200 frames and like 80% of that would be Reactor Cocoa. So it was really hard to figure out what was going on. And also all the method calls probably would have been slow for performance. And also the accessibility API was not commonly used back then. And it was hard to kind of find examples on how to use it. So I kind of ran out of steam. I had slow progress because building the UI I wanted to build for Shortcut was pretty much very annoying to build. There was frustration at broken accessibility implementations in apps, especially within Apple's own apps. And it was also an architectural dead end because kind of my first major Mac app, I made a lot of mistakes. And it didn't help that the Mac dev communities were generally a lot smaller than iOS, which is a factor of how it is. But ultimately, I ran out of mental capacity and burnt out from working at various startups at the point in time. And that little screenshot photo is the changelog where I pretty much did nothing for like 5-6 years. And then in came Swift and Swift UI. So the last meaningful update I released was back in late 2014. I began experimenting with Swift for Shortcut in 2017. And honestly, I love Swift, minus all the weird compiler issues you would have and weird type shenanigans that would happen. Thankfully, a lot less so now. But I still didn't like storyboards. They were really holding me back from doing what I wanted to do. So when Swift UI came around, I gave it a play during the second lockdown of 2020 because I had oodles of time, which I liked, but the tooling was a bit clunky still. Previews, at least back then, took too long to update for what I wanted, and I would get broken previews a lot. So that screenshot there kind of shows the preview broke for some weird linker issue that took me a long time to figure out because no one else had run into it. Turns out changing the product or target name causes Xcode to shit the bed a lot, and I couldn't find anything until I magically figured it out what it was by myself. And previews is not hot reloading, which is what I really wanted. And what that means is it doesn't work on a running app. It also had a new ecosystem, so or at least back then, so there wasn't a lot of libraries and tooling and widgets you can use. So you had to build a lot of stuff yourself, and I'm quite lazy, so yeah. What I wanted was the ability to have fast iterations, and what that means to me is state-preserving hot reloading. A good ecosystem, so decent libraries and all that stuff, great tooling, and for me that kind of meant good debugging tools and good error reporting tools. This is the image I feel like closest represents what I wanted. Which is, I mean, the analogy isn't perfect, but changing tires on a car while it's moving seems like a useful thing. The viable choices back then, I first looked at React Native for Mac, which sounds good, apart from people don't liking JavaScript kind of stuff. But ultimately, I had a look and decided it was bad because it's a Microsoft project. Can anyone really trust Microsoft to maintain a React Native for Mac? I mean, I couldn't, so I kind of just tossed that idea straight out. So ultimately, I was left with standard HTML JavaScript frameworks like React, Vue, Svelte, all of which have state-preserving hot reloading. There's prior art for using HTML.js in Mac apps definitely exists. The two main categories are either Electron, which is used in Discord, Slack, 1Password 8, Signal, and many others, Notion, and then not Electron, which I think there's iTunes Store used some of that, and some preference panes, and that's all I could find at short notice. Admittedly, I didn't look very hard. Electron, there's a lot of hate for Electron. I feel like a lot of it's fair hate as well. It's definitely not suited for panel type apps, which is what Shortcut ultimately is. I'm pretty sure there's no ability to query accessibility APIs, and considering it's cross-platforms, it wouldn't make sense for it to do it. I had no desire to be cross-platform. And Electron Framework is just a smidge under 200 megabytes, which is a lot to add to an app. So I turned to looking at WK WebView, which is effectively Apple's own framework for displaying web content inside both Mac and iOS apps, which if you've built a web view in your app, you probably would have used it. So given it's Apple's own, it benefits from Apple's full stack integration. So it's battle tested on mobile class devices, which means it's probably pretty good on both CPU efficiency and memory efficiency. And as it's built in, it adds 0 megabytes to app size, assuming you don't count linking overhead. And in early experiments, I confirmed that WK WebViews can be transparent, which was really important to me. So the next iteration at the architecture then became a Swift core, which hosts the accessibility engine, which is the code that handles talking to the accessibility APIs and giving me somewhat useful data back. It also handles the UI actions, so mouse movement, mouse clicks, inserting emojis, which is actually a lot harder when you have to consider Electron apps don't respect how the text APIs that native NS text fields use. And Sparkle again, because again, I don't think there's anything else out there that does anything like Sparkle that is as battle tested. The interface uses WK WebView, and inside I decided to opt for Vue and Vuex, which for the interface, where I picked it for a combination of ergonomics, speed, and ecosystem. Where ergonomics is, I guess, the developer experience of like, it was just easy to build and iterate on. Yeah. I also use self-hosted Sentry for both error and performance tracking for both Swift and JavaScript code. And that screenshot there is the source code for the main query panel that you would have saw underneath the window just before. And as you can see, it's just HTML. The good. So I had massive improvements in productivity. A lot of that which came from proper hot reloading, which I'll give a demo after the slide. I was able to iterate quite quickly with the interface as well as the logic, because it turns out when I use a language I've been using for 20-something years, it's a lot faster than using a language I've not really used. JavaScript has a massive ecosystem. Just look at any node modules folder. Someone got the joke. Safari Web Inspector is quite good. You could almost think of it like Reveal, but built into Safari. Obviously not as good as Reveal, but the capability is there. So that screenshot there you see is Safari Web Inspector, and I can use that to inspect a running version of my app. And I can do the same thing, like tweak the style, CSS, pretty much, I guess, what Reveal can do, but it's just in my browser, I suppose. I also get access to rich logging, which is actually pretty cool. What that means is rather than simple like text-based logging, I can log entire tables, I can log UI elements, as in I can log accessibility elements in the console, which I can then view in context of a tree, which is amazing. Fantastic for debugging. Shortcut is 15 megabytes, which half of which is Paddle and Sparkle. The icon accounts for 3 megabytes because it's quite detailed. And the actual binary with the native and packed JavaScript code is 5 megabytes. I almost forgot to do a demo. How am I going to do this? Hot reloading. Let's do... let's do that there. Let's activate Shortcut. Debug menu lock. Cool. Alright, so it'll stay open. Oh my god, this is gonna be... Alright. I did not practice this part where I would have to look back on a screen. Okay. So, what you see, this is the code for the results row. So each row in the result view. This is just, yeah, so this is what that looks like. A view component has everything in one file, which some people hate, but I love it. So you have markup at the top, you have CSS in the middle, and then you have like JavaScript at the bottom. So that kind of lets me edit everything to do with the component in one place, which I love. So I'll just, let's say I hated my users, and I want them to use Comic Sans for the font. Font family, oh my god, Comic Sans MS. And I hit save, and it's Comic Sans MS. So I probably can't see that very well, so... Huh? You can't? Oh, well, I mean, that's why I did it. Font size, I'll just double it for the time being to make it easy to see. Yeah, cool. Obviously, yeah, so I hit save and it's there. And I can do this with a running app, which is quite nice. And it's not just styles as well. I can actually modify code. For example, if I want to make it say something else entirely. That lag is really annoying to deal with. Hello, CocoaHeads. Hit save. And it's there. So this makes iterating and building out a feature very, very fast compared to what's possible, what's currently possible in any of Apple stuff. Oh my god, where's my cursor? And yeah, that's the power of hot reloading. It's not all gravy though. So obviously the big problem is increased integration complexity. So this is probably most relevant in building the actual app. I don't think anyone's done it the way I've done it at the very least, so it's definitely new ground. And there's also the problem of error reporting and simplification for to-go bases. And I mean, the actual part of talking from the website to the native side is actually not too bad. You just kind of use post message to pass messages from each one, which has been fine. But it's also off the beaten track. I don't think anyone else is doing it like this, which makes it more isolating, I suppose. But the big problem with all this is I don't like JavaScript. You can ask me why later. Performance and efficiency, I'm assuming a lot of people have a memory usage as a key one here. So after running Shortcut for a week, this is a very unscientific test. The native part was using 85 megs. The web content itself, which hosts the actual web view, 180 megs. There's a networking process, which I assume Apple has a good reason to do it that way, but that's 20 megs, for a total of just a smidge under 300 megs. Comparisons to existing apps, Calendar app and the Calendar agent uses 330 megs. Signal, which is Electron, I'm pretty sure, is 1.1 gig. Tweetbot is native, but 432 megs still. CPU efficiency, the fuzzy searching part with all the synonyms I'm working with, and it kind of does a lot to make things more searchable than not, so you can be kind of a bit off and figure it out. It takes about 10 milliseconds on my M1X MacBook Pro, which is probably unfair comparison to a lot of machines out there. I have not been able to test on older Intel Macs because I don't have one that can run Monterey anymore. So if someone has a slow Intel Mac that can run Monterey they want to sell, hit me up. It uses no CPU when idle, which I feel like is a given, but you know, I'll say it there. The web content uses less CPU than the native end, but that's kind of because the enumeration part is a lot more CPU intensive than the user interface part. The time efficiency. So this is, I guess, is it efficient to build it this way? And for me, at least, it feels at least 2 to 3 times faster for me to build it with this architecture compared to my previous one. It could be high, it could be small. I don't know. This is just a wild guess. And this is important to me because Shortcut is one of many side projects and hobbies, and so that's why time efficiency is important to me. What I would like to see, honestly, I want to see Apple implement their own hot reloading mechanism. Pretty sure Android has had it for quite some time now. I don't do any Android development, so I don't know, but I'm pretty sure they do. Web has had it for quite some time, obviously. And I think it's probably about time Apple made it happen. I know there's like third-party projects which kind of do it, but I feel like something like this is better off Apple themselves doing it, so hopefully that happens one day. I want to see more flexible licensing SDKs. That isn't Apple because they charge 15 to 30%. Mostly I want to see the ability to have like fixed one-off purchase for year updates alongside monthly annual subscriptions, so I can eventually make money off both the people who hate subscriptions and the people who love them. I would also like to see apps using the correct AX role definition. This is kind of like the traits thing that you would have saw in Tony's talk. Again, lots of apps don't implement accessibility correctly, and most people won't realize until they use a tool like Shortcut, which heavily utilizes the API, and then see that even in Xcode there's buttons which aren't tagged as buttons. So a lot of I've had to resort to effectively considering static text as valid UI controls because in many apps they are. So if you want to make sure your app is accessible, you can use Shortcut to kind of just operate. If you can operate Shortcut, if you can operate your app with Shortcut, then it has a good chance of being accessible, but it's not going to be as good as a tool like Reveal, who will actually show you all the hierarchy, the order, and so on and so forth. Cool thing to note though, Shortcut does work on iOS apps. If you run an iOS app on your Mac or in a simulator, Shortcut will work on that. So it's kind of a good way to kind of do a quick litmus test of whether or not you can actually, whether basic stuff is tagged correctly, ultimately. Oh yeah, Shortcut also works in the browser. I think I said that already. And yeah, it works on Slack and Electron apps, which has been annoying to work with. And ultimately, I want to see more apps exposing the interface in a more structured intent form. We're seeing more of that with more apps implementing their own command palette type interfaces. I think that's honestly the future, and until then, Shortcut could probably get most of the way there. That's all I had to talk about today. If you like the idea of Shortcut and try it out, you can brew install Shortcut or download it from shortcut.app. You can follow Shortcut app on Twitter for more. My socials, Twitter, Chendo, and on Slack, I'm Chendo as well. And I have a blog, which I haven't updated for quite some time, but that's also chen.do. Any questions? Hello?
Yo, did post them in Slack, but 2 questions. How much effort does creating the UI that resembles a native app take when using HTML and JavaScript?
Oh, it's like super easy. I mean, I've been building web stuff for 20 years or so, I suppose. So it's probably not a good indicator. But if I had to build, like for example, that view of Shortcut where you saw the query panel and all that stuff, that would have taken. I never got to that point with SwiftUI because I kind of just gave up because it didn't work the way I wanted to do. And then I was like, okay, I need to make it an overlay. And I was like, okay, I need to use a NS hosting view and then do all sorts of weird stuff. And I just never really got there in the end. So I don't know. But if it helps, so when Shortcut is activated, so when Shortcut is activated, that is actually, it actually creates a transparent window and a transparent web view, and Shortcut is, and the overlay is kind of taking over the entire screen. We can't see that because it's transparent, but when it overlays and shows you the overlay with all the highlighted elements and stuff, all that is kind of being drawn as HTML elements and then being overlaid onto the screen. And then I can, like, for example, in this state, I can then go in and tweak how everything looks, which is the whole reason why I built it that way. Yeah. sorry, that's not really an answer to your question.
No, it gives a good indication as to why you made that choice. So yeah.
Effectively, I was able to, because the main thing I couldn't do with the old shortcut was, it was like the only UI was like a text box, and then all the highlighted elements, and all that stuff was kind of slow. Whereas now I was able to get to the query panel in probably like 2 evenings worth of work, and that was beginning to be functional, and that was probably at least an order of magnitude faster than I could have done it in Swift UI, I think.
Cool. Second question. A lot of people don't run with the standard font size on their Macs. Does Shortcut take those different settings into account? Any challenges in implementing it?
I haven't tested that, but one thing that does work is, I guess, dark versus light mode. Safari has the ability to effectively detect what the system wants, and I just present the appropriate. I just apply the relevant CSS for that, and it was really easy. But I'm not sure about the font sizes. If Safari can expose it to me, then I can use it. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Should talk to the guys from Art Processors about font sizes
Yeah.
and web content. Were there any other questions?
Cool. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you, Chendo.
I'd like to give thanks to our sponsors tonight, Itty Bitty Apps, DS and Deloitte Digital. It was so great. Actually, I really enjoyed those talks, especially Chendo's little interjection that Reactive Cocoa made debugging hell. I can only imagine it in Objective-C, actually. I deal with it in Swift, and it's compounded by the fact that a lot of the code comments and a lot of the method names are actually written in Japanese because it's in Swift, so I'm like, what the hell is going on here? And frequently have to end up rewriting it myself, so I feel your pain, bro. I understand exactly where you're coming from. And as I mentioned before, we have a drinks night, which is also got the wrong date on the slide as well. It is the 30th of August on the 20th on the Tuesday. Look forward to seeing you all there. And it's at Penny Blue, somewhere in Melbourne CBD, and you can find information on that in the hashtag Drinks Night channel on the Slack. And it will probably be posted on Twitter as well by multiple people in the group. So I believe now we're all going to pack off to the pub in true Australian style to the Mitre Tavern. I don't know where that is, but so I'm just going to be like, it's out of here.
There's the crowd, follow the crowd.
Yeah, just follow the people and follow the whiskey. I'm assuming by the glass, the smell of the whiskey. And before you go, make sure to just grab those Kit Kats that are there, because I'm not taking them back with me. Otherwise, Rob, they're all yours. You might get
Please
wasabi.
help yourself to all of the food. It goes to waste if we don't take it. So if you want lunch tomorrow, please take it.
Yeah, that too. And thanks for joining us tonight at Mantel Group. Yeah, Mantel Group. Yes. All right. That's everything I think from me, and I hope I didn't do a terrible job at this.
Awesome.